The Dragon Emperor returned from war and found his children asleep in the human maid's arms. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. In the vast chambers of the Imperial Palace on Draconos Prime, silence reigned where once the laughter of royal children had echoed freely. The war had changed everything, even here in the heart of the most powerful empire in the galaxy. Emperor Verazoth of the Drakari race stood at the entrance to his private quarters, his massive scaled form casting long shadows across the polished obsidian floor. After 5 years battling the hegemony forces across 3 galactic sectors, he had finally returned home. Victory had come at a terrible cost. Millions of his people dead, dozens of colony worlds reduced to ash, and worst of all, 5 years away from his 3 young children. The Emperor's golden eyes narrowed as he scanned the royal chambers. Something was amiss. The guard rotation was different, the security protocols altered, and most concerningly, he could not hear his children. Verazoth's clawed hand instinctively moved to the ceremonial blade at his hip. Had the hegemony somehow infiltrated the palace? Had they taken his children? Had the sacrifices of millions been for nothing? Your Imperial Majesty. The palace steward, Selthos, appeared with a deep bow, his old scales creaking with emotion. We did not expect your return for another cycle. The victory celebrations are still being prepared. Where are my children? The Emperor's voice was low thunder, the sound that had commanded fleets and struck fear into the hearts of enemies across the galaxy. Selthos hesitated, just for a moment, but long enough for the Emperor to notice. They are in the royal nursery, Your Majesty. At this hour? It is well past midnight. Perhaps Your Majesty would like to refresh himself after the journey? The Imperial bath. Take me to my children. Now. The corridors of the palace seemed different to Verazoth. 5 years of war had changed him, hardened him, made him see threats where perhaps none existed. But no, there was definitely something different. The royal guards stood at attention as he passed, yet their posture seemed relaxed in a way that would have been unthinkable before his departure. The children have established their own routines, Your Majesty, Selthos explained as they walked. We thought it best not to disturb them too much during your absence. I left explicit instructions for their care and education. The Emperor rumbled. Have they been followed? Again, that slight hesitation. In spirit, Your Majesty, but circumstances required adaptations. Before Verazoth could demand clarification, they had arrived at the royal nursery, a vast suite of rooms that had been specially designed for the imperial children, Prince Zorith, Princess Mekara, and the youngest, Prince Velik. The guards at the entrance snapped to attention with considerably more sharpness than those in the corridors. Open the doors, Verazoth commanded. Your Majesty, perhaps I should enter first and open the doors. Each word fell like a stone. The guards complied, and Emperor Verazoth swept into the royal nursery. The outer chamber was empty, though signs of recent activity were everywhere. Toys strewn about, books left open, drawing implements and strange colorful shapes made of some primitive material. Verazoth frowned. This disorder would never have been tolerated in his youth. A soft sound drifted from the inner chamber, the sleeping quarters. It was singing? A gentle, melodious voice unlike any Drakari's. The Emperor moved silently across the room, his warrior's instincts taking over. He pressed himself against the wall beside the doorway to the inner chamber and peered cautiously around the edge. What he saw froze him in place. The inner chamber was dimly lit by bioluminescent crystals that cast a gentle blue glow across the scene. In the center of the room, on a pile of cushions that was certainly not the formal sleeping platform he had commissioned, were his 3 children. Prince Zorith, now 10 cycles old, Princess Mekara, 8 cycles, and little Prince Velik, who had barely begun to speak when Verazoth left for war. They were sleeping peacefully, their little scaled bodies rising and falling with deep, contented breaths. And they were curled around a creature the Emperor had never seen before. A human, he realized with shock. A female human with pale skin and long auburn hair was cradling the children, one arm around Velik, while Mekara's head rested in her lap, and Zorith leaned against her shoulder. The human was singing softly, a lullaby in what must have been her native tongue, her five-fingered hand gently stroking Velik's head crest. Verizoth had encountered humans during the war. They were a relatively new species to galactic politics, physically weak, with soft skin, no natural weapons, and a woefully short lifespan. The Drakari Empire had grudgingly accepted them as minor allies against the hegemony, but they were considered barely more than useful primitives. And now, here was one, touching the Imperial children, an offense punishable by immediate execution. The Emperor stepped into the doorway, his massive frame blocking the light from the outer chamber. The human looked up, and to his further astonishment, she did not react with terror as any sane being would upon facing the Dragon Emperor unexpected. Instead, her eyes widened in recognition, and she smiled at him. "Your Majesty," she whispered, careful not to wake the children. "You've returned early. What wonderful news." Verizoth stood speechless, a condition he had not experienced since he was a hatchling. The human seemed to take his silence as permission to continue. "The children just fell asleep," she said, still whispering. "They were so excited about tomorrow's Crystal Garden excursion that it took 3 stories and 2 songs to settle them." She looked down fondly at the sleeping princes and princess. "I'm afraid we've completely rearranged your carefully planned schedule, but the royal tutors agreed that a balanced approach to education yields better results." The Emperor found his voice at last. "Who are you?" he demanded, though he kept his volume controlled, some instinct preventing him from waking his peacefully sleeping children. The human looked surprised. "I'm Emily Parker, Your Majesty, the children's caretaker for the past 4 years. Did the palace administration not inform you?" "Caretaker." Verizotha's gaze darted to Selthos, who had strategically remained in the outer chamber. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation outside, Your Majesty," Emily suggested, carefully beginning to extricate herself from the tangle of sleeping royal children. With practiced movements that spoke of long experience, she shifted Velik to a pillow, gently laid Mekara down, and eased away from Zorith. The Emperor watched in amazement as she expertly tucked covers around each child without waking them. Once free, Emily rose, revealing herself to be incredibly small, reaching only to the middle of Verizotha's chest, and padded silently to the door, gesturing for him to follow her back to the outer chamber. "Explain," the Emperor commanded Selthos once they had withdrawn from the sleeping chamber. The old steward bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, shortly after your departure, the royal caretaker you appointed fell ill and passed into the ancestral realms. We sought a replacement among the noble houses, but—" He trailed off uncomfortably. "But—" Verizotha's tail lashed once, a warning sign recognized throughout the empire. "The children rejected them all," Emily said simply. After the 4th caretaker resigned in tears, the palace was growing desperate. I was working as a cultural attaché with the human diplomatic mission when Princess Mekara wandered into a state meeting. We connected. When the palace staff saw how well the princess responded to me, they offered me the position temporarily. She shrugged. "That was 4 years ago." "This is outrageous," Verizoth hissed. "You are not Drakari. You know nothing of our traditions, our protocols, our ways. You cannot possibly be raising imperial children correctly." Emily met his gaze steadily, which was itself remarkable. Most Drakari would lower their eyes before the Emperor's direct gaze. "With all due respect, Your Majesty, I've spent the past 4 years learning everything about Drakari culture, history, and protocols. I've worked closely with the royal tutors to ensure the children receive proper instruction in all traditional areas. I can recite the 17 precepts of imperial conduct and have memorized the entire lineage of the eternal flame back 30 generations." The Emperor's frill rose slightly in surprise. Most Drakari nobles could not claim such knowledge. Furthermore, Emily continued, "the children are thriving. Prince Zorith has shown exceptional aptitude in strategic studies, Princess Mekara has already composed 3 ceremonial flame dances that the Temple of Ancestors has adopted for official use, and Prince Velik, who struggled with speech when I arrived, now speaks 4 languages fluently, including my own English, which has proven diplomatically useful. It's true, Your Majesty, Selthos interjected cautiously. The royal physicians report all 3 children are developing ahead of expected benchmarks. And their happiness. The old steward's voice softened. It has been a joy to hear laughter in these halls again. Verizoth was silent for a long moment, processing this information. Then, with imperial decisiveness, he said, "Leave us. I wish to speak with this Emily alone." Once Selthos had departed, the Emperor circled the human slowly, examining her. She remained calm under his scrutiny, which was unusual enough to impress him slightly. "You are not afraid of me," he observed. "I've spent 4 years listening to your children talk about you, Your Majesty. They adore you. They've counted the days until your return." Emily smiled faintly. "It's difficult to fear someone you've heard described as the best at pillow fort construction in the entire galaxy." Something tightened in the Emperor's chest at her words. "My children speak of me every day." Zorith keeps a victory journal where he records all news from the front. Mekara includes you in her nightly prayers to the ancestors. And Velik carries your official portrait with him everywhere. It's probably in his hand right now as he sleeps. Verizoth moved to a viewport, looking out at the capital city sprawled beneath the palace. The rebuilding had already begun, new structures rising from the ashes of hegemony bombardments. "Why would a human choose to care for Drakari children?" he asked finally. "Our peoples have little in common. Our cultures are vastly different. And the position of royal caretaker offers minimal prestige for a non-Drakari." Emily joined him at the viewport, maintaining a respectful distance. "I lost my family in the early hegemony attacks on human colony worlds," she said simply. "Your children needed someone. I needed someone to care for. It was healing for all of us." The Emperor studied her reflection in the viewport glass. "You have no fear addressing an emperor directly. Did you have high station on your world?" Emily laughed softly. "No, Your Majesty. I was a teacher at a small school. But humans are adaptable. And children are children, regardless of species. They need consistency, boundaries, education, and, he prompted when she hesitated. And love, Your Majesty. They need to be loved." Verizoth turned to face her fully. Drakari raised their offspring with discipline and tradition. Human love, as you call it, is a luxury for after proper character has been formed. With respect, Your Majesty, I've found that approach insufficient for children who have lived through war and separation from their only living parent. Before the Emperor could respond to this borderline seditious statement, a small voice called from the inner chamber. "Emily? Emily, where did you go?" The human's attention immediately shifted. "Excuse me, Your Majesty," she said, already moving toward the inner chamber. Verizoth followed, his curiosity overcoming imperial protocol. Inside, little Prince Velik was sitting up, his scales glinting blue in the dim light. His eyes, so like Verizoth's own golden ones, were wide with the remnants of fear from whatever had awakened him. "I'm here, little flame," Emily said softly, sitting beside him on the cushions. "Just stepped out for a moment." "I dreamed of the big lights again," Velik said, his voice small. "The ones that made the city burn." The Emperor felt another pang in his chest. The child was describing the orbital bombardment that had struck the capital 3 years ago. Velik would have been only 2 at the time. "Those lights are gone now," Emily assured him, stroking his head crest. "Remember what we talked about? The bad ships can't come back because your father is keeping them away." "Father is very strong," Velik agreed sleepily. "When he comes home, he'll make all the bad things go away forever." The Emperor moved forward without conscious thought. "Yes, I will," he said, his deep voice gentle in a way it hadn't been since before the war. Velik's head snapped up, his eyes going impossibly wide. For a terrible moment, Verizoth feared his youngest might not recognize him. It had been more than half the child's life since they'd last seen each other. But then Velik let out a chirp of pure joy, a sound that pierced straight through the Emperor's armored heart. "Father!" Velik launched himself from the cushions, tiny wings unfurled in excitement. The Emperor caught him automatically, cradling the small body against his chest armor. The commotion woke the other children. Princess Mekara sat up, rubbing her eyes, then froze when she saw who stood in the chamber. "Father," she whispered, disbelief and hope warring in her voice. "Is it really you?" "It is, my fierce one," Verazoth confirmed, using the nickname he had given her when she was hatched. Mekara let out a cry that was half sob, half jubilant battle call, and scrambled across the cushions. The Emperor knelt to embrace her with his free arm, Velik still clinging to his chest. Prince Zorith, the eldest, rose more sedately, but his tail was lashing with barely contained emotion, a trait he had inherited from his father. "Your Majesty," he said formally, attempting to bow as protocol demanded. But when Verazoth extended his arm to include his firstborn in the embrace, Zorith's composure crumbled. With a choked sound, he pressed himself against his father's side, his small claws digging into the imperial armor as if afraid the Emperor might disappear again. Emily Parker watched the reunion with a soft smile, quietly backing toward the door to give the royal family privacy. But Velik spotted her retreat. "Emily, Emily, father is home," he called excitedly. "Come see." The human hesitated, clearly uncertain of her place in this moment. Verazoth found himself studying her anew through his children's eyes. This small, soft creature had been their constant when he could not be. She had soothed their nightmares, guided their education, and by all accounts, given them the stability they needed during war. "Stay," the Emperor said, surprising himself as much as her. "It seems we have much to discuss about the care of my children during my absence." He looked down at the three young Drakari clinging to him, and perhaps about their care going forward. Mekara tugged at her father's ceremonial cape. "Does this mean Emily can stay? Forever and ever?" "We will discuss it," Verazoth said diplomatically, though he was already beginning to suspect that removing this human from his children's lives would be neither simple nor wise. Zorith, ever the strategist, seized the moment. "Father, you must see what Emily has taught us." "Velik, show father your English." The youngest prince puffed up importantly. "Welcome home, father," he said carefully in the human language. "We missed you every day." Emperor Verazoth of the Drakari, conqueror of the hegemony, master of 1,000 worlds, felt something within him soften, something that 5 years of brutal warfare had calcified. He looked from his children to the human who had cared for them in his absence, and for the first time since receiving news of the hegemony's surrender, he felt truly victorious. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "there is much that Drakari and humans can learn from each other." Emily's smile widened. "I've always thought so, Your Majesty." The next morning found the imperial palace in a state of controlled chaos. News of the emperor's early return had spread, and nobles from across the capital were arriving to pay their respects and celebrate the victory. Through it all, Verazoth observed his children and their human caretaker with increasing interest. Emily Parker moved through the imperial household with surprising ease, clearly familiar with the complex protocols of Drakari court life. She ensured the children were properly dressed in ceremonial garb, while simultaneously briefing them on which nobles would be present and reminding them of the appropriate greetings for each house. Most surprisingly to Verazoth, she managed to make it seem like a game rather than a duty, with the children eagerly competing to recall the correct lineages and honors. House Vexery approaches from the East Gardens, led by Lord Tazek, Emily announced, peering out a viewport. House Vexery holds the Amber Plains and has served the Imperial fleet for 16 generations, recited Mekara promptly. Their greeting is, "May your flames reach the ancestors." "Excellent," Emily praised. "And what is significant about Lord Tazek specifically?" Zorith answered this one. "He lost his right wing in the Battle of Serpos Prime, saving grandfather's flagship. We must stand to his left during greetings out of respect." Verazoth found himself impressed despite his lingering reservations. His children were displaying a grasp of court politics that many adult nobles lacked. As the day progressed, the emperor watched Emily navigate the complex social hierarchy of the imperial court with remarkable skill. She remained deferential without being subservient, knowledgeable without being presumptuous, and most importantly, she kept the children engaged through what would normally have been hours of tedious ceremony. During a brief lull in the proceedings, Verizoth cornered the Grand Minister of Imperial Affairs, an ancient Drakari named the Vox. Tell me honestly, the Vox, this human caretaker, has she been a positive influence? The old minister's frill rippled thoughtfully. I was against it initially, Your Majesty. A human, caring for imperial children? Preposterous. But the results speak for themselves. The princes and princess are more engaged in their studies than any imperial offspring in living memory. They display a curiosity about the galaxy that I find refreshing, and they have developed a remarkable capacity for diplomacy. Diplomacy? Verizoth raised an eye ridge. Indeed. Last cycle, during the tributary reception for the Feldari Confederation, Princess Mekara prevented a major incident by reciting a traditional Feldari greeting that even our senior diplomatic corps had forgotten. When asked how she knew it, she said, Emily taught me that everyone feels more comfortable when their traditions are respected. Verizoth mulled this over as he watched Emily help Velik adjust his ceremonial headdress, the small prince chattering excitedly about something that made the human laugh. And the court accepts her presence? He asked finally. The Vox made a gesture of qualified agreement. There was resistance initially, but after she negotiated that trade agreement with the human colonies, she what? The Emperor's frill flared in surprise. Ah, perhaps that report hadn't reached you at the front. When our dilithium supplies were running critically low, the human suggested contacting her people who had discovered a new vein in their colony sector. She facilitated a trade agreement that provided us essential resources at a critical juncture of the war, in exchange for, of all things, Drakari art and cultural artifacts. The Vox gave a bemused huff. Apparently, humans value such things highly. Before the Emperor could respond, a commotion arose near the main reception hall. The children and Emily were nowhere in sight, but a group of noble-born Drakari youths were speaking loudly, their frills raised in agitation. Disgraceful, allowing a primitive to influence imperial offspring, one was saying, his scales flashing with disdain. My father says the human should be removed now that the Emperor has returned. Verizoth moved toward the group, but before he could intervene, Prince Zorith appeared, his small form rigid with anger. You will retract your words about Emily immediately, Kreth of House Zarvos, the young prince said, his voice carrying clearly across the chamber. Or face imperial displeasure. The older youth sneered. And what would you know of imperial tradition, little prince? You have been raised by a soft-skinned primate instead of a proper Drakari nurse. Princess Mekara appeared beside her brother, her ceremonial dress gleaming. Emily knows more about Drakari tradition than you ever will, Kreth. She can recite all 17 volumes of the Imperial Chronicles. Can you? The noble youth faltered slightly, but recovered with a hiss. Knowledge without blood means nothing. The human cannot understand our ways, our honor, our honor. Zorith interrupted, his voice surprisingly commanding for one so young. Was it honorable when your father withdrew his forces from Proxima Sector during the Battle of the Corsair Nebula? 3 Drakari vessels were lost because of his cowardice. A collective gasp went up from the assembled courtiers. The accusation was grave and accurate, Verizoth knew. He had privately censured Lord Zarvos for that very action, though the matter had been kept from public knowledge to maintain morale. Kreth's frill extended fully, a sign of rage among Drakari. You dare? A hatchling questioning the honor of a noble house. Perhaps if you had been raised properly, you would understand your place. He advanced menacingly on the young prince, who stood his ground with remarkable courage. Verizoth was about to intervene when Emily Parker appeared, placing herself between the children and the angry noble youth. That's quite enough, young Lord Zarvos, she said calmly. I'm sure your father would be disappointed to see you threatening Imperial children, regardless of your personal feelings. Stand aside, human, Kreth snarled. This is Drakari business. No, it's Imperial business, Emily corrected, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp. And threatening the Imperial heirs is treason under the Code of Eternal Flame, Section 3, Paragraph 12. The punishment is exile to the outer reaches, if I recall correctly. The noble youth hesitated, clearly thrown by her knowledge of Drakari law. Varazoth chose this moment to make his presence known, stepping forward with imperial gravitas. The human speaks correctly, he said, his voice carrying throughout the chamber. Though I might be inclined toward leniency, considering your youth, provided an immediate and sincere apology is offered. Kreth dropped immediately to a prostrate position, his earlier bravado evaporating in the face of imperial authority. Forgive me, your Imperial Majesty. I spoke out of turn. I humbly beg forgiveness from the Imperial heirs and... He swallowed visibly. And from the human caretaker. Emily inclined her head graciously, then guided the children away from the spectacle. Varazoth noticed how she immediately began speaking to them in low, calming tones, dissipating the tension of the moment rather than inflaming it further, a stark contrast to how most Drakari would have used such a victory to reinforce dominance. Later that evening, after the day's ceremonies had concluded and the children had been put to bed, the Emperor summoned Emily to his private study. She arrived promptly, still wearing the formal attire she had adopted for the day's events, a curious blend of human and Drakari styling that somehow managed to acknowledge both cultures without diminishing either. Your Majesty wished to see me? She asked, performing a perfect court bow. Sit. Varazoth gestured to a chair positioned across from his much larger seat. When she had done so, he studied her for a long moment. You handled the situation with young Lord Zarvos skillfully today. Thank you, Your Majesty. It was not a compliment, merely an observation, he clarified. I am trying to understand how a human came to wield such influence in the imperial household in mere years. Emily met his gaze steadily. I don't see it as wielding influence, Your Majesty. I see it as fulfilling my duties to the children in your absence. They needed someone to teach them, guide them, and yes, protect them, even from other Drakari when necessary. And you believe yourself qualified for this role? I believe results speak for themselves. She gestured toward the Imperial Data Console on his desk. The children's academic assessments, their physical development, their emotional well-being, all these metrics have improved consistently under my care. But more importantly, she leaned forward slightly. They are happy, well-adjusted children despite growing up during wartime with their father fighting on the front lines. And now that I have returned? Varazoth asked, his voice carefully neutral. What role do you envision for yourself? Human. Emily hesitated for the first time. That is not for me to decide, Your Majesty. I serve at the pleasure of the imperial throne. If you wish me to depart, I will do so, though I would request time to properly transition the children to their new caretaker. And if I asked you to stay? Something flickered across her face. Hope, perhaps? Then I would continue to serve the imperial family to the best of my abilities for as long as I am needed. The Emperor rose and moved to the viewport, looking out at the capital city illuminated by the 3 moons of Draconos. The rebuilding efforts were well underway, new structures rising where hegemony weapons had left only rubble. The war has changed many things, he said finally. Old alliances have been tested. New ones have been forged. Species that once barely acknowledged each other have fought and died together. He turned back to face her. Perhaps it is time for the Empire itself to adapt as well. Your Majesty, my children trust you, Emily Parker. More significantly, they respect you, not out of fear, as is traditional in Drakari child-rearing, but out of genuine affection and admiration. That is unusual and potentially valuable. He returned to his seat, leaning forward with sudden intensity. The post-war galaxy will require new approaches to diplomacy and governance. Humans have proven themselves surprisingly resilient and adaptable allies. A continued connection between our peoples could prove beneficial. Are you offering me a permanent position, Your Majesty? Emily asked, clearly trying to follow his reasoning. I am considering it, Verizoth confirmed. But first, I wish to understand you better. Tomorrow, you will accompany me as I observe my children's daily routines. I want to see firsthand this different approach you have implemented. Emily smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her alien features in a way Verizoth found surprisingly pleasant. I would be honored, Your Majesty. The children will be thrilled to show you what they've learned. Indeed. The Emperor rose, signaling the end of their conversation. Rest well, Emily Parker. Tomorrow promises to be educational for us both. As the human bowed and departed, Emperor Verizoth remained in his study, contemplating the unexpected situation he had returned to. He had won the war, secured the Empire's future, and come home to find his children thriving under the care of a species he had previously considered barely worth diplomatic recognition. Perhaps, he mused, victory took many forms, some more surprising than others. Dawn broke over the imperial capital, bathing the palace in crimson light. Emperor Verizoth stood on his private balcony, watching the city come alive. 5 years of brutal warfare had changed him fundamentally. He had left a ruler, he had returned a warrior. But the greatest change awaited him within his own home, the transformation of his children under the care of a human. The door to his chambers slid open, and the emperor turned to find Selthos, the palace steward, entering with a formal bow. Your Majesty, the human caretaker awaits with the imperial children as requested. Verizoth nodded. I will join them shortly. When the steward had departed, the emperor activated his private communication terminal. The face of Fleet Admiral Kozar appeared, his battle-scarred features respectful but weary. The hegemony delegation has arrived in the Serpos system, Your Majesty. They await your presence for the formal surrender ceremony. And the terms we discussed? Prepared exactly as you commanded. But, the Admiral hesitated, there are rumors of resistance cells forming in the outer colonies. Some hegemony hardliners refuse to accept defeat. Then they will learn what true defeat means, Verizoth said coldly. Maintain position. I will join you in 3 days. The Admiral saluted, and the connection terminated. The Emperor lingered a moment longer, gazing out at his rebuilt capital. Peace had been won at tremendous cost. Now came the harder task of maintaining it. With imperial purpose, Verizoth made his way to the eastern wing of the palace where the children's educational complex was located. As he approached, he heard something unexpected, laughter. Not the restrained, polite amusement typical of Drakari nobility, but genuine, unrestrained joy. He entered silently, positioning himself in the shadows of the grand archway. The central chamber had been transformed from the austere learning hall he remembered into something quite different. The rigid seating had been replaced by a circular arrangement that allowed the children to see each other as they learned. The walls, once adorned only with ancestral battle tapestries, now also displayed star charts, mathematical formulas, and what appeared to be art created by the children themselves. In the center of this transformed space, Emily Parker stood with all 3 imperial children. They were engaged in what appeared to be a lesson about interstellar diplomacy, but delivered as an elaborate game. Emily was holding a glowing orb that projected the image of different alien species as she posed complex diplomatic scenarios to the children. The Altarian ambassador has just informed you that your use of the formal greeting was actually a grave insult in their culture, Emily said, the projection showing a tall, willowy alien with multiple eyes. The diplomatic summit begins in 10 minutes. What do you do, Prince Zorith? The young prince considered, his tail swishing thoughtfully. I would apologize immediately and ask the ambassador to teach me the correct greeting. Then I would offer a traditional Drakari fire gem as a gesture of respect and reconciliation. Excellent approach, Emily nodded. Princess Mekara, the ambassador accepts the apology but seems uncomfortable with the fire gem. Why might that be? Mekara's eyes brightened. Altarians evolved on a water world. Fire is seen as destructive in their culture, not purifying like in ours. I would replace the fire gem with. She snapped her clawed fingers. A water crystal from the Sapphire Lakes. Perfect adaptation, Emily praised. Prince Velik. Now the Altarian wishes to form an alliance against the Zorgak's hegemony, but your father has a non-aggression pact with the Zorgaks. What would you say? Velik, despite being the youngest, straightened his shoulders importantly. I would say that Drakari honor all treaties, but perhaps we could discuss cultural exchange instead of military alliance. Then I would inform father of the Altarian concerns privately. Verizoth felt a surge of pride at his youngest son's diplomatic instinct, followed by the realization that he had learned this not from traditional Drakari education, but from a human. Emily smiled warmly at Velik. That shows excellent judgment, Your Highness. Maintaining trust while finding alternative solutions is the mark of a skilled diplomat. She touched the glowing orb, changing the projection to a new species. Now, let's discuss the Turellian trade delegation. I believe, Verizoth said, stepping from the shadows, that an actual diplomatic demonstration might be more instructive. All four occupants of the room turned toward him. The children immediately stood straighter, though Verizoth noted they did not display the fearful deference he had been raised to expect from imperial offspring in the presence of their emperor father. Your Majesty, Emily said, performing a perfect court bow while somehow maintaining eye contact, a subtle balance of respect and confidence that impressed him despite himself. We would be honored by your participation in today's lesson. Father, Velik could not contain his excitement. Are you going to teach us about the war? Perhaps another time, Verizoth said, moving into the chamber and taking in the educational materials with greater attention. Today I wish to observe how you spend your days. For the next several hours, the Emperor watched as Emily guided his children through their education. It was unlike anything he had experienced in his own upbringing. Traditional Drakari subjects, warfare, lineage studies, flame ceremonies, were taught alongside mathematics, sciences, arts, and a comprehensive overview of galactic cultures that extended far beyond strategic evaluation of potential enemies. Most surprising was the teaching method. Rather than the rigid memorization and harsh discipline Verizoth remembered, Emily used games, discussions, and practical exercises that encouraged the children to think independently and solve problems creatively. Yet there was no lack of respect or discipline. When Princess Mekara became frustrated with a particularly challenging mathematics problem and lashed her tail in anger, Emily calmly guided her through breathing techniques until the young princess could approach the problem with a clear mind. During a midday break, while the children were practicing ceremonial flame dancing in the adjacent chamber, Verizoth confronted the human directly. Your methods are most unconventional by Drakari standards. Emily nodded. I've incorporated the essential elements of traditional Drakari education while adapting the methodology to suit each child's individual learning style. Prince Zorith responds well to strategic challenges. Princess Mekara learns best through creative expression, and Prince Velik absorbs knowledge through storytelling and example. And the results? The human activated a data pad, displaying the children's progress across multiple subjects and developmental markers. The results speak for themselves, Your Majesty. All three children are exceeding expected benchmarks for their age groups. More importantly, they are developing critical thinking skills that will serve them throughout their lives. Verizoth studied the data carefully. There is less emphasis on military training than I would have expected. With respect, Your Majesty, your children have lived their entire conscious lives during wartime. They understand conflict all too well. I've focused on giving them the tools to build and maintain peace, believing that will be the greater challenge of their generation. The Emperor raised an eye ridge at her boldness, but found he could not disagree with her assessment. Show me their physical training, he said instead. The afternoon revealed yet more surprises. Emily had enlisted the Imperial Guard captain to design a training regimen that developed the children's natural Drakari abilities while compensating for their individual challenges. Zorith, who had inherited his mother's lighter bone structure, was learning to use speed and agility rather than brute strength. Mekara, with her exceptionally developed wing membranes, was receiving specialized flight training that would eventually make her one of the most agile aerial combatants in the Empire. Even little Velik, who had been born with a slightly malformed right claw, was being taught adapted fighting techniques that turned his supposed weakness into an advantage. As dusk approached, Verizoth found himself in the Imperial Gardens, watching as Emily led the children through what appeared to be a human meditation practice adapted for Drakari physiology. The sight was so incongruous. 3 young dragons sitting in peaceful stillness under the guidance of a small human, that the Emperor almost laughed aloud, a reaction he had not experienced in many years. When the children were finally escorted to their evening meal by the palace attendants, Verizoth gestured for Emily to join him on a garden terrace overlooking the capital. "You have given me much to consider, Emily Parker," he said, using her name directly for the first time. "Your approach defies many centuries of imperial tradition, yet I cannot argue with the results." "Tradition is important, Your Majesty," Emily replied, watching the 3 moons begin to rise over the city. "I've made sure the children understand and respect Drakari heritage, but tradition must serve the living, not the other way around." A controversial perspective in imperial circles, perhaps, but I believe it's one the Empire may need if it's to thrive in the post-war galaxy. Emily turned to face him directly. "Your children will inherit a very different empire than the one you did, Your Majesty. They will need to be different kinds of rulers." Verizoth was silent for a long moment, weighing her words against his own experiences in the war. Finally, he asked, "What do you believe they need most from me now?" The question clearly surprised her. "From you, Your Majesty? You have been their constant these past years. You know them in ways I do not yet. What do my children need from their father?" Emily's expression softened. "They need to know you, Your Majesty, not just as their emperor, but as their father. They need your guidance, your wisdom from the war, but also your time, your attention, your—" She hesitated. "Say it," Verizoth commanded. "Your love," Emily finished simply. "Children need to know they are loved, regardless of their achievements or failures." "Drakari do not speak of such things," the Emperor said stiffly. "Perhaps not in words," Emily acknowledged. "But there are many ways to show what cannot be said." Their conversation was interrupted by a palace guard approaching with urgency. "Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion. A priority communication has arrived from the outer defense perimeter." Verizoth's expression darkened. "Return to the children," he told Emily. "I must attend to this matter." As the Emperor strode away, Emily called after him. "They were hoping you would join them for the evening meal, Your Majesty." Verizoth paused, torn between imperial duty and fatherly inclination in a way he had never experienced before. Tell them I will try," he said finally, before continuing toward the war room. The situation was worse than initially reported. A significant hegemony splinter fleet had emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Drakari home system. While not large enough to threaten the capital directly, their presence was a clear violation of the ceasefire and a potential precursor to more serious hostilities. "The fleet is commanded by Warlord Kavex," reported Admiral Theros via hologram. "He was not present at the main surrender and claims the terms are invalid without his house's approval." "How many vessels?" Verizoth demanded, studying the tactical display. 27 warships, including his flagship. They've established position near Draconos 4 and are demanding direct negotiation with you, Your Majesty." The Emperor's frill extended in cold anger. "Kavex believes he can threaten my homeworld while my children sleep beneath its moons." He turned to his war council. "Prepare my battle cruiser. I will deal with this personally." "Your Majesty," Admiral Theros cautioned, "this could be a trap designed to lure you away from the capital. Intelligence suggests there may be hegemony infiltrators already within the palace district." Verizoth hesitated, torn between his instinct to meet the threat directly and his newfound awareness of his children's need for his presence. "Increase palace security to maximum alert," he ordered finally. "I will remain here and address Kavex via secure transmission." Make it clear that any further advancement toward Draconos will be considered an act of war, and the consequences will be terminal. As the War Council dispersed to execute his commands, Verrazov found himself returning not to the Imperial Command Center, but to the royal dining hall where his children would be having their evening meal. He entered quietly, observing the scene before announcing his presence. The three Imperial children were seated around a circular table, another departure from tradition, as Imperial offspring had historically been seated at separate tables according to rank. Emily sat with them, helping Velik cut a piece of meat while listening to Mekara describe a complex flame dance sequence. Zorith was consulting a datapad, apparently researching something that had arisen in their conversation. The Altarian ceremonial greeting actually evolved from a defensive posture, the young prince was explaining. Their ancestors needed to show empty upper limbs to prove they weren't carrying stinging tentacles. Exactly right, Your Highness, Emily praised. Cultural practices often have practical origins that. She stopped as she noticed the Emperor standing in the doorway. Your Majesty. The children turned, their expressions lighting up with joy. Father, you came, Mekara exclaimed. As I promised, Verrazov said, moving to take the empty seat that he realized had been waiting for him all along. Though I may be called away again shortly, there are matters requiring my attention. Is it the Hegemony Splinter Fleet near Draconos 4? Zorith asked, his expression serious. Verrazov stared at his eldest son in surprise. How do you know of this? I maintain a tactical awareness data feed, Zorith explained, showing his datapad. Emily says a future emperor must always know what threatens his people, even during peacetime. The emperor shot a questioning look at the human, who met his gaze steadily. Prince Zorith has shown exceptional aptitude for strategic analysis, she said. I believed it would be beneficial for him to apply these skills to real situations under proper guidance. I see. Verrazov studied his son with new appreciation. And what would you do about Warlord Kavex's fleet, my son? Zorith straightened, clearly honored to be asked his opinion on a matter of imperial security. I would maintain our main fleet position to protect Draconos, but dispatch a rapid response force to secure the outer mining colonies on Draconos 4. Kavex's house has suffered significant resource depletion during the war. They need those mining facilities more than they need a symbolic victory. There was a moment of silence as Verrazov absorbed his son's assessment, which aligned remarkably with his own War Council's recommendation. A sound analysis, the Emperor said finally. Admiral Theros has proposed a similar approach. Zorith's chest swelled with pride, his scales brightening at the praise. The meal proceeded with surprising normalcy, the conversation flowing between matters of state, the children's studies, and plans for the upcoming ancestral ceremonies. When a palace guard appeared with an update on the Hegemony fleet, Verrazov was astonished to find himself feeling genuinely reluctant to leave the table. Go, father, Mekara said, seeing his hesitation. Protect our people. We understand. Indeed, Zorith agreed. Duty must come first. Little Velik climbed down from his seat and approached the Emperor, pressing a small object into his massive clawed hand. Take this for protection, the youngest prince said solemnly. Verrazov looked down to find a crudely carved stone amulet in his palm. What is this, my son? Emily helped me make it, Velik explained. Humans call it a worry stone. When you feel afraid or angry, you hold it and think of people you want to protect. It makes you stronger. The Emperor was rendered momentarily speechless by the simple gift. He looked up to find Emily watching the interaction with a gentle smile. Thank you, Velik, Verrazov said finally, carefully tucking the stone into a secure pocket of his ceremonial armor. I will keep it with me always. After issuing additional orders to his commanders, Verrazov found himself seeking out Emily later that evening. He discovered her in the palace library, researching hegemony cultural practices with an intensity that matched any imperial scholar. The children are asleep? He asked, approaching her table. Yes, Your Majesty. Though Prince Zorith requested a status update on the hegemony fleet situation when he wakes. The situation has been resolved, Verizoth informed her. Warlord Kavex received a demonstration of our new ion cannon capabilities. He has reconsidered his position and is currently en route to the official surrender ceremony. Emily smiled slightly. I'm glad to hear it was resolved without major conflict. As am I. The Emperor seated himself across from her, a decidedly informal gesture for one of his station. I find myself curious, Emily Parker. You have devoted years to the care of children not of your species, on a world far from your own, during a time of war when many humans were returning to Earth for safety. What? Emily set aside her research and considered the question carefully. When I first came to Draconos as part of the diplomatic mission, I had just lost my family in the hegemony attacks on the Proxima colonies. I had no home to return to. She looked down at her hands, five-fingered, soft, so different from Dracari claws. When I met your children, I saw that despite all their privilege and protection, they were experiencing the same loss I was: the absence of family, the uncertainty of war, the need to be brave when they were afraid. She looked up, meeting the Emperor's gaze directly. I stayed because they needed me, and perhaps because I needed them too. We helped each other heal. And now, Verizoth asked, the war is over. I have returned. Do you still believe they need you? That is not for me to decide, Your Majesty, Emily replied diplomatically. I serve at the pleasure of the imperial throne. The Emperor studied her for a long moment. You avoid my question skillfully. Allow me to be more direct. Do you wish to stay? Emily's composure faltered slightly, revealing genuine emotion beneath her professional demeanor. Yes, Your Majesty. I have come to love your children as if they were my own. The thought of leaving them. She stopped herself, clearly concerned she had overstepped. As if they were your own, Verizoth repeated, his tone unreadable. Many would consider such a statement presumptuous from a non-Dracari. I apologize if I've offended, Your Majesty. I meant only. No, the Emperor interrupted. No apology is necessary. I have seen with my own eyes how my children have thrived under your care. Whatever your methods, whatever your feelings, the results speak for themselves. He rose from his seat. I require your presence at the Imperial Council meeting tomorrow morning. There are matters that must be addressed regarding the future of the royal household. Emily bowed deeply. As you command, Your Majesty. The next morning found the Grand Imperial Council chamber filled to capacity. Every noble house was represented, along with military commanders, religious leaders, and diplomatic envoys from allied worlds. The Emperor had summoned the full council, a rare occurrence that signaled matters of highest importance. Emily Parker stood near the entrance, uncertain of her place in such august company. She wore formal attire that respectfully blended human and Dracari design elements, as had become her custom for official functions. The imperial heirs were seated in their formal positions on small thrones to the right of the Emperor's grand seat. All three children were impeccably dressed in ceremonial regalia, their scales polished to a brilliant sheen, their posture perfect. Yet Emily noticed small personal touches that made her smile inwardly. Zorith had included a tactical databand on his wrist, carefully disguised as a ceremonial bracelet. Mekaro wore a small earth flower preserved in resin among her traditional flame gems, and Velik clutched a carved worry stone matching the one he had given his father. A hush fell over the assembly as Emperor Verizoth entered, resplendent in full battle regalia. The massive Dracari ruler moved with deadly grace to his throne, his golden eyes surveying the gathered dignitaries with imperial authority. We have summoned this council, he began, his voice filling the chamber without effort, to address matters critical to the future of the Empire in this new era of peace. For nearly an hour, the Emperor outlined his vision for the post-war galaxy, detailing reconstruction efforts, diplomatic initiatives, and security protocols that would shape Dracari policy for generations to come. The council listened in respectful silence, occasionally offering ritual responses when required by tradition. Finally, Verizoth said, "We must address the matter of the imperial household." Emily felt a flutter of anxiety. Her position had always been considered temporary, a wartime necessity. With peace established and the emperor returned, traditional protocols would likely be reinstated. For 5 years, Verasov continued, while we fought to preserve our empire, the imperial heirs were entrusted to the care of a human, Emily Parker. All eyes turned toward her, some curious, others openly hostile. Emily maintained a dignified posture, though her heart raced. This arrangement was unconventional, the emperor acknowledged. It was born of necessity rather than design. Yet we have observed the results with our own eyes and found them to be exceptional. Our heirs have flourished under her guidance, developing not only the traditional Dracari virtues of strength and honor, but also diplomatic insight, intellectual curiosity, and emotional resilience that will serve them well as future leaders. Murmurs rippled through the council. Lord Zarvos, father of the young noble who had confronted the princess, rose to speak. Your Majesty, while we respect your assessment, tradition demands that imperial offspring be raised by those who understand Dracari ways. Perhaps the humans served adequately during crisis, but surely now a proper Dracari caretaker should be appointed? Several council members nodded in agreement. Emily kept her expression neutral, though the thought of leaving the children sent a sharp pain through her chest. The emperor's frill expanded slightly, a subtle warning sign that those who knew him recognized immediately. Are you suggesting, Lord Zarvos, that we do not know what is best for our own offspring? No, Your Majesty, of course not. Zarvos backtracked quickly. The empire did not survive 5 years of devastating war by clinging blindly to tradition, Verasov interrupted. We adapted. We evolved. We formed new alliances with species we once considered beneath our notice. His gaze swept the chamber. Humans fought and died alongside Dracari warriors. Their scientific innovations helped turn the tide against the hegemony. And one human, in particular, preserved something precious beyond measure, the hearts and minds of our children during their most formative years. The emperor rose from his throne, an action so unexpected that several council members gasped audibly. He descended the dais and moved with imperial purpose toward Emily, who instinctively dropped into a deep bow. Rise, Emily Parker, Verasov commanded. When she had done so, he continued in a voice that carried throughout the chamber. For your service to the imperial family, for your dedication to our heirs, and for your contributions to Dracari-human relations, we bestow upon you the Order of the Eternal Flame, First Degree. A collective intake of breath echoed through the chamber. The Order of the Eternal Flame was the highest honor in the Empire, rarely granted even to Dracari nobles, and never before to a non-Dracari. The Emperor removed a medallion from within his ceremonial armor, a brilliant gem that seemed to contain actual fire within its depths, suspended on a chain of metals not found on Earth. He placed it around Emily's neck with surprising gentleness for his massive clawed hands. Furthermore, Verasov continued, we hereby appoint you Imperial Cultural Attaché and Senior Caretaker to the royal household, with all rights, privileges, and responsibilities therein. You will continue to guide our children's education and development, while also serving as official liaison between Dracari and human diplomatic missions. Emily looked up at the Emperor in astonishment, momentarily forgetting protocol. Your Majesty, I am honored beyond words. The honor is deserved, Verasov stated simply. Then, to the shock of the entire council, he added, you have taught our children much, Emily Parker. Perhaps you have taught their father something as well. That evening, as twilight bathed the imperial palace in soft purple light, Emily sat with the 3 royal children in their private garden. The princes and princess were still excited about the day's events, particularly their father's unprecedented recognition of their human caretaker. Did you see Lord Zarvos's face when father gave you the order? Zorith chuckled. His scales turned almost white. I thought Grand Minister the Vox might fall over when father called you by your first name in front of the entire council, Mekara added, practicing a flame dance pattern as she spoke. Does this mean you're staying forever? Velik asked, the question that truly mattered to him. Emily smiled, pulling the youngest prince into a gentle embrace. It means I'm staying for as long as you need me, little flame. Which is forever, Velik declared with imperial certainty. A shadow fell across the garden path, and the children looked up to see their father approaching. They immediately stood respectfully, though Emily noted with approval that they no longer displayed the fearful deference that had once been expected. "Father," Mekara called, "Emily is teaching us about human constellation patterns. They're very different from ours." Indeed, Verazoth seated himself on a garden bench designed for his massive form. "Perhaps I might learn as well." Emily concealed her surprise at the Emperor's interest. "Of course, Your Majesty. On Earth, ancient humans connected the stars into patterns representing creatures, heroes, and gods from their mythologies. As darkness fell completely, the stars emerged in the clear Draconos sky. Emily pointed out various patterns, explaining the human legends behind them. The children added their own interpretations, creating a blend of Dracari and human mythology that made the Emperor rumble with rare laughter. When the younger children began to yawn, Verazoth surprised everyone by announcing, "I shall escort my children to their sleeping chambers tonight." As the Emperor led his offspring toward the palace, Velik drowsily riding on his armored shoulder, he turned back to Emily. "Join us for the morning meal tomorrow. There are matters regarding the children's education we must discuss." Emily bowed. "As you wish, Your Majesty." Left alone in the garden, Emily looked up at the alien stars that had become so familiar over the years. The medallion of the eternal flame warmed against her skin, a physical reminder of how far she had come from the grieving, displaced diplomat who had first arrived on Draconos. The Dragon Emperor had returned from war and found his children asleep in a human's arms. And somehow, in that unexpected moment, the seeds of a new understanding between their species had been planted, one that might grow into something remarkable in the peace to come. 5 years later, the Imperial Palace gardens buzzed with activity as preparations for Princess Mekara's coming-of-age ceremony reached their final stages. Diplomatic delegations from across the galaxy had arrived to witness the event, including the largest human contingent ever to visit Draconos Prime. In a quiet corner away from the commotion, Emily Parker adjusted the ceremonial regalia of Prince Velik, now a confident young Dracari of 10 cycles. Her hands moved with practiced ease despite the increasing arthritis that plagued her human joints on this high-gravity world. "Stand still, Your Highness," she chided gently as Velik fidgeted with excitement. The human delegation brought actual horses, Emily. Real Earth horses. "Father says I can ride one after the ceremony if I maintain proper imperial dignity throughout." "All the more reason to ensure your regalia is perfect," Emily replied, hiding her smile. A shadow fell across them, and they looked up to see Emperor Verazoth approaching. The years of peace had changed him subtly. He moved with the same deadly grace, but the constant tension of wartime had eased from his bearing. At his side walked Prince Zorith, now 15 cycles and nearly adult by Dracari standards, already showing the commanding presence that would one day make him a formidable emperor. "Leave us," Verazoth told his sons. "I would speak with Emily alone." When the princes had departed, the emperor studied his children's caretaker with his penetrating golden gaze. "The human medical delegates report that this world continues to take a toll on your physiology," he said without preamble. Emily straightened, surprised by his directness. "I manage quite well, Your Majesty." "Do not attempt diplomacy with me, Emily Parker. I have known you too long." His frill rippled with something that might have been concern. "The gravity affects your bones. The atmospheric composition strains your lungs. You have served this family for 10 years on a world not designed for your kind. Are you suggesting I should leave, Your Majesty?" Emily asked, her heart constricting at the thought. "I am suggesting," Verazoth said carefully, "that perhaps it is time for the imperial family to learn more of your world, as you have learned of ours." Emily stared at him in confusion until his meaning became clear. "You're proposing a visit to Earth?" "I am proposing an extended diplomatic residence," the Emperor clarified. 1 year, perhaps 2. The children should experience human culture directly, not merely through your teachings. And you should have time to recover your strength in your native environment. But the Empire can function without my physical presence for a time. Verizoth's expression was unreadable. The war taught us the value of adaptation, Emily Parker. Perhaps peace requires the same lesson. Before Emily could respond, Princess Mekara appeared, resplendent in her coming-of-age regalia. Father, the Altarian delegation has arrived, and she stopped, noticing the serious expressions. Is something wrong? Nothing is wrong, the Emperor assured her. We were discussing the possibility of an imperial visit to Earth after your ceremony. Mekara's eyes widened with delight. Truly? We would see Emily's world. She turned to her caretaker excitedly. You always said you would show me the oceans someday. And so I shall, Your Highness, Emily promised, her voice thick with sudden emotion. As the princess hurried off to share the news with her brothers, Emperor Verizoth regarded the human who had changed his family so profoundly. 10 years ago, I returned from war to find my children asleep in your arms, he said quietly. I thought it an aberration, a temporary necessity born of crisis. And now, Your Majesty? The Dragon Emperor looked out over his peaceful empire to the stars beyond where Earth circled its yellow sun. Now I believe it may have been the most important diplomatic contact in our history. He turned back to her, his expression softening in a way few had ever witnessed. My children love you, Emily Parker. Perhaps it is time their father acknowledged that he has come to value you as well. Emily smiled, the Order of the Eternal Flame gleaming at her throat. I think I've always known that, Your Majesty. Some things need not be said to be understood. Together, the human caretaker and the Dragon Emperor moved toward the ceremonial grounds, where 3 remarkable young Drakari, raised with the best of 2 worlds, awaited the beginning of a new chapter in their shared story. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.